So, the fourth dimension, something scientists have been trying to understand for years, is what I'm going to turn into a video game. Now, any sane person would be saying, Sir 7 Gaming, how can you turn if the fourth dimension into a video game? Well, that's true. As we're humans, we can only perceive the first three dimensions X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm gonna explain how I'm gonna be doing this. But first, please consider clicking the subscribe button and clicking the like button, as it will help this channel out very much and will also show other people this cool video. Thank you, and now let's move on. So, the basics of the fourth dimension. We already know that the fourth dimension is hard to understand, but in this video, I'm going to make sure that you understand what the fourth dimension is and what I will be doing. Now, first of all, in every single dimension, there's always a primary shape. For example, in the first dimension, there's a line. In the second dimension, there's a square. In the third dimension, there's a cube. So, if anybody knows what I'm going to say, you all know it's going to be a tesseract. No, it's not the one from Marvel. Okay, it is definitely not the one from Marvel. A tesseract is like a cube, but in the fourth dimension. As you could see, a tesseract has 8 different parts to it, and of course, it keeps on turning itself inside out in this GIF. Except one thing. In the fourth dimension, actually, it would look a lot different. But as we're humans, this is the only thing we could perceive of it. Now, how would we find the volume of it? Of course, in the first dimension, you don't have to do anything, you just have to find the sine length. In the second dimension, to find the volume or area of a square, you have to multiply it by itself. In the third dimension, you have to multiply it by itself twice. And in the fourth dimension, of course, you have to multiply it by itself 3 times. This is what I would call tesseracting, as multiplying something by itself once is called squaring, as this is in the second dimension, etc., etc. So, how am I going to create this game? Now, as you heard me say earlier, Tesseract has 8 different parts into it. So, what if we split the fourth dimension into 8 different third dimensions? Then we would get what I would like to call, no, this is not the official name for it, a meta chunk. 8 of these meta chunks would be equal to hyperchunk, which is once again not the official name for it. But a hyperchunk would be the fourth dimensional version of, well, a chunk. Now, if you don't know, a chunk is basically what is rendered in a video game. For example, if you set your render distance to about 4 chunks, then you could see 4, I don't know, chunks worth of render distance or 16 blocks. I don't know. It really depends on what the video game is. But in this case, we're gonna make it so that each time the person has to be in at least one meta chunk. And to help the players gradually adjust, we can make it so that they can only obtain a meta chunk at the time. So yes, the game will start out as a third dimensional game, but the player will make their way into the fourth dimension. I hope this is a good idea and it can attract much attention. And of course, when I finish this game, I will release it on Steam. It's not just gonna be like, oh no, I just left it in the browser and I'm not gonna pay attention or not work on it anymore. I will make sure to keep all my effort into making this game. I haven't thought of a name for it yet, but I assure you I will in the next video. But of course, these are only the basics. Now, what else is there for us to understand? So, as a recap of the last part of the video, I explained how the fourth dimension works and how I'm going to implement it into my game. Now, I'm going to explain how I'm going to create the game, such as what game engine I'm using, and what coding I'm using, and how I'm going to create the models, music, and textures. For the game engine, I'll be using Unity. At the time of this video's release, you guys would probably be booing me and saying that Unity sucks. Of course, at this time it does, because they just announced the runtime fee policy, and it costs people 20 cents every single time a person downloads their game. That's absurd. Why would anyone do that? But seriously, the reason I'm still using Unity is because I've mainly familiarized myself with its primary coding language, C Sharp. I don't really want to get into other game engines like Unreal or GDevelop because they use something else, C++. And I'm too lazy to learn C++, especially since it's one of the hardest coding languages. For the 3D modeling editor, I'll be using Blender. Blender is one of the greatest 3D model editors out there, especially because it's free and it still provides so many features. I'm literally using it right now to animate this video. So now what else am I gonna do? For the music, I'll be using FL Studio. FL Studio is probably the most advanced music maker out there, and of course, it could be used to create music for video games. Finally, for textures, I'll probably get some from other third party websites like Polygon or Textures.com. Now, let's move on to the game components and how it's going to work mainly. Recap. We just discussed how I'm going to be creating my game and what I'm going to be using to creating it. Now, I'm going to say what the game will be like and what to expect of it. So we already discussed over the basics of the game, for example, the meta chunks and hyper chunk stuff, but what will the game actually be like? Like, will it be fun or will it just be 4D? Well, of course, I need to mix in my ratio of both fourth dimension and fun. So therefore, I'm going to make sure that this will be an open level game. An open level game would be more like such as, so think of a 2D level game. There are certain worlds or certain areas that have certain levels. Beat them and you move on to the next level. That's how I'd think I'd make this. Except each level is something different. Sort of like Fall Guys, where each level is a different type, like race, survival, or hunt, or logic. That would be the same thing here, except it's not really multiplayer. Of course, there will be a multiplayer mode, but this will mainly be single player. And the game modes will be more relative to that, such as mainly a maze game mode, or try to kill as many enemies as you can game mode, or just reach the finish line. Of course, that's how you usually can do stuff. I want to add a level editor and level creator as soon as I can, but I think that might come out as a later update and might not come out with the very first copy of the game. Of course, I'll do my best to make it so that everybody appreciates it, and I'm thinking of making my own game mode where there's different types of sandbox gameplay. So it's an open world survival, instead of you having to go to reach different parts and levels. But either way, I want to make it so that it's fun for everyone. I don't want it to be like, oh, you're only stuck on this level, so you can only wait till you grind out or get lucky and beat this level and move on to the next one. No, I'm not going to be doing that. I'll make it so that there's different game modes and different ways to have fun in case you're stuck on one thing. I want to make it so that it's accessible and fun towards everyone. Recap. I just explained how my game would work and how I'm going to make my game accessible. Now let's move on to the final part, the conclusion. So, in conclusion, yes, I'm gonna try to make one of the very first 40 games. I know there's other YouTubers who make their own 40 games, but I'm gonna make sure that I update this and make it so frequent that I'll upload many videos, and that too in one time. I don't want to make it so that I upload just one video and stop development. I want to make it so I upload a video once every 8 months or even worse, a year. I'm going to make sure to have a constant upload schedule of a maximum of 2 months. Make sure to look forward to my next video, and as always, this is Sir7 Gaming. Goodbye, and see you next time.